Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today for part two of my review of All the Haunts Be Ours, a Compendium of Folk Horror. Long title there. Today I will be covering discs 1 through 4 of the set. And please excuse me if I do have to glance at my notes from time to time, as this is a lot to cover. And some of these movies I saw over 20 days ago, so I remember a lot of things. This is just a quick refresher. So what I'm going to do is go by disc, give the title of the film, give a very brief overview, like a sentence or so about what the film is about, and then I will talk about my thoughts on the film and the special features on each disc. And there should be 2 more videos coming out after this where I cover discs 5 through 8 and 9 through 12. So the set starts out really strongly with the documentary called Woodlands, Dark and Days Bewitched. It is the newest film on the set. It's only a few years old, and I was going to watch these in disc order anyway, but it's great that they put the documentary first because it is a fantastic overview of folk horror. It basically covers tons of movies. I wrote down a ton of movies, some I had heard of, some I hadn't, to watch in the future because it goes through a lot of them, which is really the main advantage of something like this, besides giving you an overview on folk horror, which was something I knew some about but wasn't like an expert on or anything, not overly familiar with it. It also gives you a good list of recommendations of films to watch in the future, which I'm finding out some are very easy to get a hold of and some are very hard to get a hold of. Excuse me, but it's an excellent documentary. I will give a little warning here. It is over 3 hours long. It's kind of funny because most of the films in this set are pretty short, but this is by far the longest, but it never dragged or anything, which is a credit to the film. I was very interested, but also kind of dreading in the back of my mind a little bit a 3 hour plus documentary, but it's interesting all the way through and really good and informative. And I appreciate that it covers a wide spectrum of films. It covers folk horror from all around the world. Now, if I do have one little nitpick, I'm kind of torn on this because it does give, it shows obviously scenes and clips from a lot of films, including films that are in this set. And there are some, I would say, mild spoilers to these films. So if you're someone who doesn't like to be spoiled at all or watch trailers or anything like that, you might not want to watch the documentary first because it definitely shows clips from films in the set. But my slightly bigger issue was a film not in the set, The Wicker Man, which I've seen before. It basically gives away the twist and the ending to the film. It actually shows clips from it. Now, I get it's a documentary, and documentaries show things like this, but also, did they really have to show like half of the ending of The Wicker Man in this? For me, it was no big deal because I've seen the film a couple times before and know the ending, but I did think this was kind of bizarre, but I can't really dock it points for it because this is a documentary. So just a heads up on that. But this is very well put together. And it seems like the people interviewed for this set really knew what they were talking about. They weren't just rambling on. So overall, I highly recommend Woodlands, Dark and Days Bewitched. Just beware of spoilers. Oh, and I am going to be rating these films from 1 to 5. I know I haven't really been doing that on my new reviews because I haven't seen a need. But I am going to do it on this set just so you can get an idea of which films I like the best and compare them to the ones that I give lower ratings. So I gave Woodlands, Dark and Days Bewitched a 4.5 out of 5. It's really great. The only reason it didn't get a 5 is because there were just a few slight minutes where I thought parts maybe could have been shortened a little bit. And also the flow of the documentary when it goes from one region to another. Little weird, but these are just nitpicks. This is a great documentary. As far as special features, there's actually some outtakes that they had to take out of the documentary for length reasons and for flow reasons, which I get, but they're good. The first one is an outtake about music for folk horror films. I see why this was cut because it's like another 20 minutes long, but it is very informative. And there's also a piece, which I wish they would have left in actually, on Brazilian folk horror, which isn't that long, and I probably would have left it in myself, but again, the documentary is already really long. But if you really like the material in the documentary, these are great outtakes to watch. There is also a segment on how the animation was created. Yes, there are little animated pieces in the documentary, and this was a great feature. It's short, and it's one of my favorites on this entire set of 20 discs. And then there was just a short reading of folk poetry set to pictures. It's fine. It's folk poetry set to pictures. If you like this kind of narration over images type thing, you'll probably enjoy it. If not, I don't think it's essential. But, I love that they put all these extra little features in the set for those that are interested. One more quick note before I get to disc 2, because I'm already running way long on this. I did watch every special feature on every disc, for better or worse, but I did not watch the audio commentaries just because I didn't want to watch each film a second time and, have this review up 2 months from now. But, all right, so disc 2 was a film I did watch twice, but for a different reason, and that's Eyes of Fire. Another great film. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I would call this film a combination of a horror, western, fantasy, and the reason I watched it twice is because there's actually 2 versions. There's the shorter theatrical cut and the longer director's cut. I actually like both. The shorter film is tighter and moves quicker. The longer version does flesh out the characters more, but does make the middle of the film drag a little bit. So take your pick. I would recommend it either way, depending on what you prefer. But this film, the basic premise is a man and a group of his followers. He's like a religious leader of sorts. Basically get pushed out of a town, kind of. And I don't know if they're really on the run, but they kind of just leave to start over. But when they get to the forest, the woods, whatever you want to call it, and find a new place to live, a lot of strange, creepy things start happening. I really enjoyed this film. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. There's some weird editing in spots, and the acting's really good, though, I will say, and the direction's pretty good as well. I really like how they did the special effects in this film. I've seen some call them dated, but I thought they were those charming old 80s kind of effects. This is an 80s film, and it's really a unique blend of horror, fantasy, and western that just worked for me. I definitely recommend it. There is an interview with the director in the special features. It's fine. It's a typical director interview. I could take it or leave it, but again, I'm glad it's there. More interesting is the 3 short films. There is one called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is an animated short. It's not essential, but if you like old 60s and 70s kind of weird animation style, then I would say to check it out. Better is Transformations, a very short but very historically important film about a group of women performing magic, kind of told in a documentary style. I thought it was fantastic, and I highly recommend it, and it's short, so no reason not to watch it. And then one of the worst films on this whole set, unfortunately, Backwoods, a short, horror film attempting to be creepy. I didn't like it at all. It was just the same old kind of haunted, spooky thing that you always see. It was actually very slow, and I didn't care for the acting or directing much either. I apologize to all involved, but this just didn't do anything for me. But others may like it, but to me, you don't have to watch it. But again, the good thing about these shorts is that they're quick watches, so you might want to check it out for completionist's sake anyway. But I just couldn't get into Backwoods. Sorry. Disc 3, we go to Leptirica. This is the shortest feature film on the set. I hesitate to call it a feature because it's actually under an hour long. This is a combination, I would say, of a folk horror, vampire or werewolf film. I'm still not 100% sure. I originally thought this was a werewolf thing, but I think it might be about a vampire who's basically terrorizing a mill, which is a problem for a European town because they can't get the stuff they need, obviously, like the flour and stuff that they need in the town. And when a new young man takes over, things kind of go from there. There's also a love interest involved, a father involved, a lot of crazy townspeople involved. And this was a film that did have a bit of a rough transfer, but it didn't ruin the experience for me. Now, I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. I did think it was a really good movie. The beginning is great. The ending is one of the best on the whole set. My problem is, even at under an hour, there's a middle section of about 20 minutes in this film. I don't really want to say it's slow because there's these townspeople just walking around, and it's kind of interesting, although I'm not 100% sure everything they were doing. There's some attempts at humor which worked. I laughed, but I don't really know that it totally fits with the beginning and end of the film, but it was fine, I guess. Also, this is one of those films that tries to kind of trick you or make you figure out who the vampire slash werewolf is, and I figured it out within the first 15 minutes of the film. I thought they could have, hid this twist a little bit better. But to be fair, this is an older film. Maybe it was a surprise to audiences at the time. But overall, I liked Leptirica, and I hope I'm saying that title correctly because I'm still not sure. Once again, there's a director interview. Again, it's fine. I feel like these director interviews are just always fine. They're not great. They're not terrible. It's okay. If you're interested in a little bit more on the film, you can watch it. This is a fairly lengthy one, though, so I think it's close to the half-hour mark, so just be warned of that. Then there are two other films by the same director on this set. I guess since this was a very short feature, they put these on here. And the first one, called The Ward, is actually like 60 minutes. It's almost like the same length as Leptirica, yet they call this one a short film and Leptirica a feature. I don't really get it, but I actually thought this was better than Leptirica. This was fantastic. It kind of reminded me, it's basically about a man's journey. He comes like to this hospital, and I don't want to give too much away. It's kind of half Twilight Zone and half The Seventh Seal, if you're familiar with The Seventh Seal. If not, I suggest watching it because it's great. But I actually really liked this. It was kind of an hour that flew by for me, and like I said, I liked it better than the feature film, which gave me big hope for The Maiden's Tune, the other short film. I am using the English titles for these, by the way, because I can't pronounce the other ones. But this one was a waste of time, unfortunately. It was like 45 minutes of two people talking in a castle, and it teased a lot of things that probably because of the time period it was made never paid off. The lead actress in it is great, but it's wasted because nothing really happens till the end of this film, and to me the payoff wasn't worth sitting there. This was actually a drag. I really struggled to get through this, and I would not recommend this one unless you're a completionist and you're watching everything. But I appreciate filling up the discs and putting these shorts on there because someone else might love this. I actually saw some very good reviews for The Maiden's Tune. I don't get it, but to each their own. I've kind of learned that over time, to each their own. So a pass for me, but you might like The Maiden's Tune. And then there were actually interviews with the actors in the short films, which is going above and beyond the Call of Duty, and they were fine. They're very short and worth watching if you like either of the short films. So the last disc I'm going to cover today is disc 4. And we're going to start with Witchhammer. And oh boy, was I not prepared for this, especially after watching the first 3 discs. So Witchhammer is basically a very realistic accounting of witch trials, which, if you know anything about, were pretty scary, pretty brutal, and this movie is intense. This was a great movie with great acting. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. For a long time for me until I got to this later, this was the best film in the set. It's just one of those very intense, I would call this a political drama more than a horror film, but to be fair, this one does have enough horror elements that I think you could pass it as horror, but it's that realistic, intense situation kind of horror. This isn't one of those films that's overly entertaining in my opinion, but it's an important must-watch because of the historical importance of the event and just how well made the film is. Beautiful cinematography. This film is in black and white, and it's an older film from the early 70s, I believe, but it's just so well done. But it's one of those films you have to put yourself in the right mood for because it's just one of those intense watches that really affects you. This was one of those movies that kind of went right through me when I was watching it. It's not one I'd watch all the time, but it is one I would definitely go back to. And I highly recommend it. And it's really respectful of the subject matter as well. And it does a good job of not preaching, as some of you know who watch me all the time. I don't love stuff that's overly preachy, even if it's important. And this film does a great job of making its point and making an impact without doing that, which I always really appreciate. It's a very visually stunning film. A little bit of strange dialogue and a little bit theatrical in times. Kept it from being a 5, but this is certainly a great film. I'm really finding nitpicks now, maybe just because I don't like to give out 5s, I don't know. Although I did give a 5 to a film later in this set. There is a special feature with Kat Ellinger, who kind of does an essay about the film. Of course, it's great because it's Kat Ellinger, but I believe even she calls it a drama, not a horror film. So I do think there's enough horror elements to call this a horror film, though. It's just a realistic to life horror, not a blood and guts splatter horror, but that's perfectly fine. Love that this film was included. This is the kind of the reason I buy sets like this, is to find films like this I probably would not have seen. And then the last film I'll kind of briefly touch on is V, probably one of the most known films in the set. I actually found it strangely similar to Leptirica, also takes place in Europe, Russia, I believe. I would definitely call this one a folk horror movie. I kind of had the same goods and bads. I think the beginning and end are great. The special effects are great. I love all the supernatural elements to this film. Basically, it's about a man who encounters, I guess you could call her a witch of sorts. I'm not really sure the proper title, but things kind of spiral out of control from there when he has more and more encounters with this lady. And I thought all that stuff was great. Unfortunately, there's parts in the middle of this film, and this is only like an hour and 15 hour and 20 minute film, where they try kind of this weird humor, this stuff that's going on in other parts of the town, and it just really wasn't that interesting to me. Like, it wasn't terrible, but I'm just like, can we get back to the cool supernatural parts of this movie? But the ending of this one's so good, I still gave it a 3.5. And it's short, so, wasn't really hurt too much by any of this. There's also a special feature on this on, like Russian horror and science fiction. And it's fine, but it actually covers science fiction more than horror, so thought it was a little bit of an odd inclusion to the set. But if you're interested in this kind of thing, it's a perfectly acceptable special feature to watch. So that'll do it for this 1 to 4. I talked longer than I wanted to, so I hope that's okay. And I'll be back with more reviews on the rest of the set later in the week, maybe into early next week, but I'm going to try and finish it this week. So thanks for watching.